that things take time and you should be more patient. And never try to compress timelines that are not compressible, because ultimately what you do is that you set yourself up for disappointment. Just always make sure that you have plenty of time and never pressure yourself that you're in a rush to get somewhere. As long as you're putting the right effort in the right direction, even if things take time, you will get there. So that's for me like the biggest learning in the past 10 years.
Karl, hello and welcome.
Hi, bro. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Karl, first of all, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did your entrepreneurship journey begin?
For sure. Let me start from the beginning. So I'm originally from Alexandria in Egypt on the Mediterranean. You won't meet many Egyptians from there. Born and raised there, then went to college in the US. And in the US, seen a lot happen in the financial sphere. And when we compared what was happening in the US to what was happening in Egypt, it was clear to us that the market in Egypt is still very underdeveloped. So right after graduation from college in Michigan in the US, packed my bags, came back to Egypt, and teamed up with my brother to launch a fintech. So initially, we wanted to launch something similar to PayPal. We started exploring the regulation, but then very quickly we realized that there's a very big problem is that people don't have a bank account. They don't have an account from which they can fund any sort of digital payment solution. So we dug deeper, looked at the regulation, and what we found was very clear was there's a solution called a wallet, which acts like a mini bank account, which allows users to do all of the purposes of a bank account. They can put money at ATMs, buy online, offline, and so on. So we said, okay, this is something that the market really needs. Let's go for it. And this is when the journey started. We teamed up with a bunch of institutions in Egypt. Bearing in mind, this was in 2017. So back then, there was no such thing as venture capital in Egypt or anything of the sort. So we had to team up with local companies. And we launched a company called Rasidi. And very quickly, we found that there was a very, very big demand in the microfinance market. So, we had here a market in Egypt with 3 million beneficiaries. All of these micro entrepreneurs were taking micro loans in cash. And every, bi-weekly or at the end of the month, they would have to go to a branch and again pay the installment. So we said, for us, easiest way to get customers who really have a pain point that we can solve for them is to give them the wallet. So we started and we went to microfinance companies and we started getting the ball rolling in terms of getting consumers. Of course, the regulatory license was quite a journey. In terms of the regulator, we were the first company that wasn't a telecom operator or a bank that was wanted to operate a wallet. So the central bank was like, guys, how do we classify you? That was one of the biggest problems they had. Do we classify you as a telecom operator, to classify as a bank? But we got there. We launched, and then in 2020 we got an offer to be acquired by one of our microfinance partners who was keen on taking the solution in-house and expanding this across. It's a group of companies, expanding this across the other companies they have in the financing sphere. So this is the first journey, and this is what got us to start Octo. So back then when we were doing the payments, everything was digital on the payment side, but then we looked at the market, and on the credit side of things were still very manual. Things were still done, a loan officer would go do an assessment, it would be 2-3 days turnaround time and so on. So what we decided is to take the learnings from the first experience and apply it to the full cycle. How about we give consumers a digital credit solution and a digital payment solution combined in one, so we can give them the full needs they need in a digital and seamless way. And this is how Octo got started.
What motivated you the most on this journey? Because it is a second entrepreneurship journey. You have exited the first one. Then why did you hop on the second one? Is it easy to be an entrepreneur, by the way?
It's not easy. It's definitely some days you're saying, wait, why am I doing this? But the real motivation was, we did something, it worked, and we said this time we want to do it even better. We want to be able to do a more complete solution that can offer the consumer the full experience. And this is what, pushed us to get there.
What are the main financial services offered by Octo? What sets apart from your current competitors?
Definitely. So at Octo, we strive to give the consumers all of the main points they would need from a bank. So when someone goes into a bank, they go to put money into a bank account to store that money safely. They go to have a tool to buy, whether online or offline. That's like a debit card, for example. They go to borrow, either get a credit card, a mortgage, etc. Or they want to save. And basically the idea is at Octo, we offer these 4 main pillars of financial services to consumers. And how do we do that? We do that by giving them a card. It's a Visa prepaid card, which acts as a mini bank account for them. It allows them to put the money on it, store it safely. We have a partnership with a partner bank in Egypt who's the custodian of the funds. It allows them to buy online and offline because the card is a Visa card that works internationally. And at the same time, we give the users a credit limit. And this is one of the key advantages or key features we offer to our consumer, is that we give them this credit line that they can use to buy at any shop they want in Egypt. And after they make the purchase, they have two options. Either they use the credit line in the spirit of a credit card. At the end of the month, they repay like a statement, or they can get a hint of BNPL experience and pay that over a few equal monthly installments. So that's kind of the product offering that we have at the moment.
In Egypt, there's a large population without access to banking services, as far as I know from our earlier calls. What do you think about the size and potential of this market?
Definitely. So in Egypt, we're 110 million Egyptians. Only 24 million Egyptians have bank accounts. And when you dig deeper, out of these 24 million, only 5 million have credit cards. So not only you have a huge population that's unbanked, you have a huge population of 19 million Egyptians who are underbanked. They have bank accounts, but they may not have debit cards. They don't have a credit card for sure. They don't have access to the main pillars of banking other than just using that bank account as a safe, somewhere to just put money and store it there safely. So this for us is at Octo, the biggest opportunity we're focused on is those 19 million Egyptians who are underbanked. How do we convince them to start using a digital banking solution? How do we get them to try Octo, see that we can offer a superior product with a superior cost structure, and then over time have them use Octo as the primary bank account? That's what we're striving for. And that's the opportunity that for us is really there.
Which customer segments do you focus on specifically?
So if you look at the pyramid in Egypt, let's say you were to build a pyramid of the socioeconomic classes. You'd have A at the top, B, C, and D. We're targeting the B segment. We're looking at that segment who is banked but don't have access to formal credit, who is employed, which means also they, since they're banked, they've been KYC'd by the banks, which means they live in formal settlements. They have provided proof of income and all of that. So we're focusing on that segment. A typical person would be someone who is a mid-level employee who works at an SMB, for example. That's someone who could be part of our target segment.
What was the biggest challenge you have faced right now, and how do you overcome these kinds of challenges? Because as a startup working in the field, probably you were one of the earliest ones. What are the biggest legal or regulatory challenges you have faced?
100%. So from the first venture, a very, very big, thing we had to overcome is anytime we'd go to someone and say, we want to be the first company to get a license for a wallet outside of banks and telecom, everyone's like, you guys are crazy. It will never happen. It's like they would never give the license to you. But guess what? 2 years later, we had the license in hand. So big thing is when you're offering innovative financial solutions is you get a lot of pushback. You get a lot of pushback of people who are used to the status quo of what's working. And there's always the claim of, we've always been doing it this way. And that's very hard to overcome. It's like, okay, you've always been doing it this way. How about you try this new method? And that's something that, we always struggled with at the beginning with partners and B2B partners and so on. So that's been a hard part. Another hard part is the regulatory regime in Egypt. It takes time. So, if you know what you're doing, if you're putting the right effort, if you're following the rules and the regulations in the right way, you will always get there. But the problem is that it will take time. And you need to be able to have the financial resources to maintain, keep going and building until you secure these licenses and you're able to go live.
Can you tell us about the founding team, the Octo's culture? How do you manage your team dynamics? I know that from your earlier journey, you were co-founder with your brother. And how is it to be partners with your brother?
So it has pluses and minuses, right? It's someone you know well, you trust a lot. But then it also gets very intense, right? Because there's not only the work aspect of it, but there's also the person aspect of it. So I also live with my brother. So, we live together, we work together, we have common friends, we are seeing each other a lot of the time. And the problem is, when you work with a family member and at some point you get a diverging opinion in terms of how to take things forward, it becomes very difficult to reconcile. So that was, a great learning experience. But after that, we've decided, given a few differences in philosophies in terms of, how we want to take the products forward, how we prefer to build, depth first versus breadth first, we've decided to do different companies. although, where we sit on each other's board and, we consult heavily with each other. But we've done companies where on the day-to-day, we each lead it in a separate way. In terms of Octo, so I'm co-founding Octo now with Yusuf. So Yusuf I've met at university back in the US in Michigan. We met more than 10 years ago now. We met very randomly, actually. We were once, it was one of the first weeks of university, and then there was an international orientation. And then after that, I went outside on the curb, and then I hear Yusuf and another guy speaking in Egyptian Arabic. So I'm like, who are these people? So I just go and said, hey, I'm Karl. I'm from Egypt as well. Let's meet. And so this is how we initially met. And then over time, we realized we were doing the same degree, taking the same classes. And then, we've collaborated a lot together. And Yusuf is, we kind of complement each other. I am very much, focused on the commercial. I like to get things done quickly. I like to go fast. Yusuf is a very structured person who loves to get done things right, in the right way. And this is where we believe there's a big strength between us. We've not only worked together before, we have different strengths that complement each other. So we're able to build things in the right way.
How long it has been that setting up the Octo, and what surprised you the most while building Octo?
So we started in 2021, late in 2021. This is when we started, setting up the company and building the product, getting the license and so on. What was the most surprising? That's a tough one, right? Because we've kind of built a very similar product with very similar regulatory regime before, so not many surprises. What I would have to say is how fast things have moved. Maybe that was a surprise. Back in 2017 to 2021, things were different in Egypt. And then with what happened, globally with zero interest rates and all of the international VCs looking at Egypt and all of this, we've seen a very big change in the landscape. We went from, in 2016, I think there were like 10 fintech companies, or maybe even less, to now I think there's above 200 and something. Right? So we've seen the market explode. That's been good and bad. It's brought awareness to the market, but also it's brought a lot of, let's say, a lot of crowding to the market, a lot of requests, and this is actually one of the things that have slowed the regulator. Right, when the regulator saw an explosion of companies, they're like, okay, we need to make sure that everyone who operates knows how they operate and how it should be done. And so it slowed a bit things down. I'd say that's the biggest surprise.
So how do you maintain the work-life balance? Can you find time for yourself in this busy work schedule?
You have to. Otherwise, you burn out and then all of the effort you put right goes away. So the most important thing is to just put fixed things in your day that are essential for you to not burn out. So I need to make sure that at least 3 times a week I work out. So 8 to 9 on, let's say, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, I have to do this. No matter how much I'm behind at work, I need to make sure I get this done. At the office, we have this also part of the culture we have a half-hour lunch break where the whole team, whether they order food or they get food from home, we all sit together in the same room and have lunch at the same time. So these are few things that we've seen work very effectively. But you just have to be committed to keeping them, and then you can spend as much time working as you want.
How do you assess the startup ecosystem in Egypt?
So it's a very young ecosystem. It's still, very nascent. We can't compare it anywhere else to Europe or the US or anything of the sort. We're still in the very early stages. In terms of exit, the ecosystem doesn't have many exits. Like one of the most notable ones is Farari, who IPO'd on the local stock market, which is worth now about $500 to $600 million. So it's still very young, right? We're still what we call in phase one, wave one, where there's a lot of first-time entrepreneurs. There's a lot of companies getting started, new categories. I think in the next maybe 3-4 years, the ecosystem will have matured a bit more, and we'll get closer to more mature emerging markets, like in LATAM or Turkey, for example.
What advice would you give young entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs who wanted to start a business in Egypt, especially in Egypt?
That's a tough one, right? Who am I to give advice? But what I've seen work the most is like you need to find something someone really needs. Never think about this product is fancy or looks cool or I think it's nice. No, you have to find someone has a pain point and I can solve this pain point for them. And then if that pain point translates into clear financial savings for that person, then you have found something you should be working on. So for me, it's like find an issue, hammer down on that, and be very focused. Do one thing, do it right, become a leader in that category, and then move on to other things. Do not get pulled by, I can do this and this and this and that at the same time. it almost always never works out because you end up being like not focused across many verticals, and then you don't give your best in every one of them.
So, your previous startup, which was acquired, what lessons did you learn from this experience?
Big lesson was on cap table, that if you want to build a company in the venture space, you need to have a cap table where the founders own at least 60-70% of the company at the get-go, and that's very important. And that's something that we learned, but at the same time we couldn't have really mitigated that. Back in 2017, there was no VC around, so the way we had to found the company, we had to team up with institutions who were not in the VC mindset, but more in the traditional, joint venture. We do a company all together. So that's a very big learning. Another learning is what I just shared about find the need, right? So we did two things at Rasid. We were focused very heavily on the microfinance market, giving microfinance beneficiaries a wallet for them to get their microloans and pay back the installment. But also something we've tried is to launch a general purpose consumer wallet, right? Where we were trying to go in the street and convince users to go and then, take cash out of their pocket, put that into an ATM, charge wallet, and then use the wallet. And then what we learned is that you're actually creating more friction this way. Because if I have 50 pounds in my pocket, I want to go and buy with them. I don't want to go to an ATM, put them in a wallet, and then use the wallet to buy. So that's, something that was a very, very big learning for us.
What has been the most rewarding moments, especially in the journey of Octo so far?
So for us, it was getting to the first 1,000 users milestone. For us, that was we've built it. We've did the 0 to 1. Now it's time to focus on the 1 to 10. And then hopefully in a few years' time, we focus on the 10 to 100. That validation, when you have consumers, if sometimes, for example, you have an internet issue and your service is down, having consumers raid your call center saying, guys, where's the service? Where's the service? Is probably one of the most rewarding things, when you're feeling that the product you've put in their hands is something that they really want and really need.
So could you share me the raising funding, especially? Is it difficult? I mean, especially last year as a macro level, there were lots of difficulties in different countries, but in Egypt, is it easy to raise for the early startups?
So yes and no, right? So if you're the right founder for the market, if you have the good product that resonates, that makes sense, it's always easier to raise than if you don't have one of these things. But definitely Egypt has gone through a very hard macroeconomic environment. Specifically in the past 2 years after the Russia-Ukraine war, we've had currency devaluation. Also, Egypt economically is tied to Russia and Ukraine from tourism and wheat perspective and things like that. So it has affected the country massively from a productivity, from an income perspective, and also from a currency perspective. So that's made things tougher than usual. In Egypt, we're blessed to have a few local funds, which are great to have. So we have, again, it's part of that nascent ecosystem that's starting. There are a few funds, but we still don't have the full array. Funds in Egypt are very much focused on, late seed, Series A, kind of, that's the sweet spot for them. So there is an ecosystem that you can navigate through from a funding perspective, but it's still too nascent to have the full suite, right? If you're looking at a founder who still has an idea, who wants to get started and funded from the get-go, let's say, pre-seed/angel, it's still a bit hard to do that. But I'm confident, that things will be evolving over the next 3-4 years as, founders exits and become angels, and as the ecosystem gets more validation. I think this will get solved.
You have experience, you are graduated from US university, so you know the mindset over there and also in Egypt. What is the difference of this mindset, especially in entrepreneurs? Should you share us the cultural differences?
Definitely. So there are big cultural differences when you go into details, but from a principles perspective, I don't think I've seen many differences, right? You're an entrepreneur, you're struggling every day, you want to make sure that your company succeed, you're fighting against incumbents in the market, you're trying to make the best product with the least amount of resources. And I found that this is quite universal, right? Whether you go into other emerging markets, US, Europe, Egypt, that's something that you'll find across all startups. So that's where there's the big similarity. In terms of difference, so the US economy or the US spirit in general is more entrepreneurial than other countries. And like this, for some of our listeners, they may have an easier time comparing it between the US and Europe. In the US, it's very much work, you live to work, whereas in Europe, you work to live. And that's something that I've always found a bit different between Egypt and the US as well. We are more closer to the European spirit as a population, as a country, than to the US one. And that's sometimes a plus and a minus, right? because then it sometimes makes it difficult to find the team members who are really hungry to get working 24/7 and making this succeed. But when you're able to build the A team, with the superstars, then you're able to leapfrog the market, because you have that work ethos in your team that doesn't exist everywhere across the market, and that helps you go much faster.
How do you attract and retain the talent at Octo, especially given the challenges of finding experienced professionals in Egypt?
So that's a tough one. Like when, every time you get asked what keeps you up at night, talent is something that's very important. For us, what we found makes the most sense is people who share our culture and share the spirit and the vision of what we're building. For us, if there's someone who wants to join the team because they think that's a good financial opportunity, that's almost always not a good fit. But if someone is joining because they believe that they're building a great product that will have a long lasting impact on the market, they're building something that will have a mark on the country and on the financial services scheme, then this is what pushes them to actually bid, right? Because if we're going to try to compete on compensation, we'll never be able to compete with remote and people paying in dollars and things like that, because we're still a young startup that don't have the resources. So for us is our A team members are those who believe in the vision, believe in what we do, and are excited about what we're going to accomplish. For them, what excites them the most at the end of the month is not the paycheck, but it's getting 10,000 users, 100,000 users, a million users. That's for them what really pushes them to get through.
What role do you think fintech startups like Octo can play in promoting financial inclusion in Egypt?
What role we can do?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
100%. So like the numbers I said at the beginning, a big problem with credit specifically in Egypt is not that Egyptians don't want credit. It's not that we're a bad credit market. Actually, we sit somewhere at the intersection of developed market and Africa. Like across all companies in Egypt, the normal non-repayment rates are in the range of 3 to 4%, which is a very good repaying market. Interest rates are not crazy like in Africa. But the problem is consumers don't have access. Banks have a difficulty underwriting consumers in modern ways. It's very much focused around it's either you have payroll, so your credit has to be secured by some sort of professional formal payroll with a company that's big enough to be coded on the bank system as a payroll provider, or it's secured by another asset you have. And I believe that's the biggest problem in Egypt is how do you give people who are credit worthy, who are high income earners, yet don't have the assets or the collateral against which to take credit. And that's what we're trying to do at Octo, is allow people to get unsecured credit, those who really deserve to get it.
What are your plans for growth and expansion in the coming years?
Definitely. So we get asked that question a lot. We believe Egypt is a huge market with a huge opportunity. It's so untapped. So for us, our plans focus very much on Egypt. It focuses very much on the next at least 36 months. We want to be here. We want to become a market leader. And then after that, the idea is to look at markets where there is similarities between what we build and what other countries have a need for. Right? We don't believe in GCC. We, for example, in what we do as credit, we believe that in Saudi, UAE, the markets are quite decently well served. What we believe is finding markets that have similar structure from a financial perspective, from a socioeconomic perspective, and that's where we would look at plans beyond Egypt. But for now, we're very much focused on Egypt. We believe in getting Egypt right, making sure we're a leader here, and then we can look beyond that.
Karl, personally, how do you maintain your focus and motivation in the face of many challenges and running a startup?
We believe that whatever goes up must go down, whatever goes down must go up, right? Things always go back to the mean. So whenever you're having a bad day, it's a bad day. Whenever you're having a good day, you should also not forget that there's so much more to be done. And for us, what pushes me personally is hitting milestones. It's getting to that next step, getting stuff done, seeing more users use our product, and getting closer to our ultimate goal of becoming the leader in digital financial services in Egypt. That's what pushes us every day.
And how do you make yourself updated with news and new technologies? How to stay up to date with latest trends and innovations in the fintech industry and also technology itself as well?
So that's a tough one, right? Because you want to make sure that you're spending the right amount of time getting updated on the critical technologies that you should be updated on, but you also don't have materially the time to be updated with everything that's happening. So for us, it's we try to at the office, if someone finds something that's innovative from a technical perspective, we make sure that everyone shares it with everyone. Something we do at Octo that's unique is that every other week we have something called a bi-weekly training, which is a training where a team member goes and then explains to the whole team something new and cutting edge that they've discovered. And that allows us to all share that learning within the company. And we found that's something that's actually been very popular with our team members.
If you go back 10 years ago, after you graduated from the university, what advice would you give to your younger self when you were just starting your entrepreneur journey?
That things take time and you should be more patient. And never try to compress timelines that are not compressible, because ultimately what you do is that you set yourself up for disappointment. Just always make sure that you have plenty of time and never pressure yourself that you're in a rush to get somewhere. As long as you're putting the right effort in the right direction, even if things take time, you will get there. So that's for me like the biggest learning in the past 10 years.
So what books and resources or what podcasts or mentors have most been influential for your entrepreneurship in your entrepreneurship journey, and what are the recent books that you have read?
Definitely. So for me, podcast is where I enjoy the most reading or listening. I find it's easier. So every day to the office, my commute is around 30 to 40 minutes. So for me, that's the prime time to get a podcast or an audiobook in, and then just getting either up to date with information or reading a book. For me, one of the best podcasts I've heard lately is the Prof G podcast by Scott Galloway. He's a professor at NYU in marketing. I love his podcast. It's always good for me. It's 40 minutes to give me an update on the markets and what's happening. It's one of my favorites. Also, there is the Huberman Lab podcast. It's a bit long, but it's quite interesting, from a biological perspective. Always, gives you a good explanation, a good window into how things happen biologically.
Karl, it has been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Your insights into building Octo and navigating the Egyptian startup ecosystem was very valuable. Thank you for sharing your story and also experiences with us.
Definitely. Pleasure was mine. Thank you for having me on.